It's a legal process, and the key words are removed forcefully from the territory of the United Kingdom.
Which he would have done if he'd not been accepted this voluntary.
Well, he might have done, but it's a very long flipping queue, and he certainly wouldn't have gone to Rwanda because that plane hasn't taken off yet. So he's been given $3,000 to make his way entirely voluntarily to Rwanda, having had his application in this country fail, which puts him in precisely no categories currently occupied by the people who are supposed to be due for deportation to Rwanda. So Jonathan Gullis not only failing to understand the meaning of simple words like removed and forcefully, but also failing to understand his own government's policy. Bless his little cotton socks. But I think we both should have a slither of humble pie for forgetting all about Dan Poulter.
Look, I'm going to defend that.
Didn't I even say to you, where is Rishi Sunak most vulnerable?
And then and that would have been my perfect moment to say this is where he is most vulnerable.
Well,
because
exactly.
That absolutely. But you know what, I'm going to defend that because I don't think anybody beyond Westminster bubble had heard of Dan Poulter before this weekend's events. And
one of my followers on Twitter they told me that even at university he was known as Tory Dan.
Okay, well that's great.
You go. So they knew him, but they went to university with him.
Well,
that doesn't really count.
Look, I don't think he's, like I say, despite being a junior health minister, I don't think he was hugely well known. Not saying that excuses any of this, but the fact that Westminster and clearly the media elite of you and I, James, have forgotten this in the last 24 hours because we've been focusing on other events. You know, it's obviously not had quite the splash that Labour had hoped it might into this week. And, you know, they had 24 hours of this. What does this mean for Rishi Sunak? What does this mean for the NHS? You know, critical attacks, and rightly so, from Dan Poulter's. You know, it is a big deal for when a politician, especially a Conservative politician, defects to the Labour Party. He didn't look hugely happy about Sir Keir Starmer using Prime Minister's questions to hail him coming over to the floor. Pretty sombre expression on his face.
He must have known it was going to happen, mustn't he?
Surely, but he didn't look hugely delighted about it. But yes, that is a huge weakness, I think, for Rishi Sunak as we go into these local elections. And Keir Starmer wants to make a big deal of the NHS and the point and poke holes in the government's record on the NHS. It's something that Rishi Sunak has repeatedly failed to do. It's, you know, of his 5 promises, arguably, it's the one that he's failed most on, right? He's not reduced those waiting lists at all. They've gone up under his premiership. It is arguably his biggest weakness at the moment. And
yet Starmer kept banging the drum about national insurance or the shortfall in national insurance. I mean, is that working?
Well, it must be. I think I counted at least 6 times. Yes. He mentioned £46 billion black hole. And obviously they must have some research and focus groups within the Labour Party about what economic messages are hitting home. And they have obviously long said that they want to, you know, restore their position as a party of economic credibility, and they have sensed a chink in the Tory armour to absolutely go for is that the Conservatives say they want to scrap national insurance at some point. They haven't said when, they haven't said how, and they haven't said it will be funded. Labour, you know, rightly go on the morning round, and we media rightly scrutinise them about where they're going to pay for all their promises. So they're finally having an opportunity to turn it round onto the Conservatives, and they're absolutely going for it.
I'd cautiously suggest it didn't really land.
I don't think so, no. I don't think so.
Sunak certainly seemed relatively untroubled by it. He was in a surprisingly peppy mood. He
was pretty upbeat, I think. And like I say, I think, you know...
Maybe he's looking forward to a nice long holiday.
Yeah, maybe he's looking forward to what might happen in the next few days. But yes, I think he is in a bit of a peppier mood. He's obviously feels a bit more on the front foot when he's talking about policy, and he has had a very policy-heavy week. Talking about defence spending, talking about welfare reform, and various other things that he feels very comfortable talking about. And obviously we've had this tax cut as well that he's keen to talk about coming in this week as well. I'm sure not absolutely in any way timed for any local elections coverage at all.
Actually, a lot of mention of pensioners as well by both leaders, which reminds us that with elections, local elections and one by-election and some mayoral elections due to unfold tomorrow, pensioners are historically the most likely demographic to turn up at the ballot box, aren't they?
They are indeed, but we are expecting a very low turnout, according to all the pollsters and experts that have been telling us they don't expect it's going to be more than 35% at a push. But yes, the people that usually turn out to vote and usually turn out to vote Conservative are those older people. So I'm not surprised that Rishi Sunak might want to talk about it, but it is a surprise, I think, that Keir Starmer and the Labour Party are really going after the pensioner vote and saying, in as many words, that they will keep the triple lock, that they will put that in the party manifesto. And that's something that, you know, both parties have now committed to, there's not really a dividing line, I don't think, on pensions that they can go for. They're trying to say, and you heard Keir Starmer try and basically pin him down, saying, well, where are you going to find this money from? Where is it going to come from? And Rishi Sunak did something which he doesn't usually do. He ruled something out. He never usually does that. He never usually goes into it. He usually gives a very generic answer. But he said, no, absolutely not. I will not cut the state pension. Stop scaremongering. Yeah. That was his sort of reply. But then Keir Starmer goes, OK, would you want to rule out something else then instead? And, that gives him the onus to continue that argument. And
I mean, are there any more serious reasons as to why he may have been in a fairly upbeat? Maybe he might have been faking it, I suppose. It's all about presentation, isn't it? But I did read that he told assembled backbenchers last night that they're about to be, or party workers last night, that they're about to be part of the biggest political comeback in history. Is it possible that Rishi Sunak believes that?
I don't think so. I sort of giggled at that. I don't think that's something that's on the cards. What does he mean by political comeback? Does he mean
it means he'll win
the local elections? Does he mean he's going to go on to win the next election?
I presume that's what he meant.
Yeah. There's rallying your troops and then there's delusional. And I think most people
will say
that's
delusional. You can't tell them they're going
delusional.
to lose, can you? You can't stand in front.
But there's a difference between that and saying we're going to be part of the biggest political comeback in history. And I think that really felt over the top to me. But look, tomorrow's local elections, as we were discussing before we crossed over to PMQs, is about the scale of the loss. And if the Conservatives can create this narrative that things aren't quite as bad as the polls suggest, that actually they can hold on to some particular areas in the Red Wall, perhaps those Middle England voters in Birmingham and West Midlands, if they can hang on to them, maybe the scale of losses won't be quite as bad. That will give Tory MPs a little bit of hope, a little bit of optimism, and it will also stop them from launching a coup against them next week if all goes terribly, terribly wrong.
Do you preempt my final question, which is a return to one that you were in the middle of answering before Sir Keir Starmer got to his feet. The question I get asked most often, and I'm back on the road now with the paperback of my book, so I get asked questions a lot. The question I get asked most often is whether or not there's any prospect at all of them going for their sixth leader in 8 years.
It doesn't feel like it to me. No. You can usually feel the Tory rebellion brewing in the air. It's sort of a bit like, the weather, right? You can sort of feel it when it gets colder. But I don't think I can feel that right now. It does feel that there's not a general sense that now is the time to do that. I think most people think it would be an insane idea.
It's rallying point and appetite, I think, isn't it? And if you have both in place, it might happen.
This is a rallying point, and the Conservatives.
But I mean a person rallying point, someone around whom they can rally. That's not there. If it was, the appetite might be there.
Potentially.
And if the appetite was there, then someone might come forward and be a better rallying point. But at the moment, we've got neither.
The Tory rebels have repeatedly used May as a sort of a point where they want to go for. We're expected to not do that well in the local elections, and they're expected to use that. But look, this is probably the last point that they're going to be able to point to say we could get rid of him. Like, what else? What other flashpoints are there between now and an election where they could potentially say Rishi Sunak's going to face some weaknesses? Let's move now. This is their last point. If he does any better than expected, they're going to have absolutely no chance to get rid of him before the next election.